If you've been around this channel for a while, then you know that for a very, very long time, I could only continue to make YouTube videos by never, ever reading the comments. Because it was seriously a cesspool of very targeted, very misogynistic, very violent hate. And I just wasn't in a good place where I could deal with that very well. I mean, let's be honest, maybe 0.01% of well-adjusted people are in a good enough place to deal with that well. But I'm pretty good at it, and I've actually evolved over the years, like a Pokemon whose special ability is letting shit roll off my back. And I think YouTube has gotten a little bit better about automatically blocking and shadow banning dumbasses, so I maybe don't even see a lot of it anymore. So I do actually read, at least like scan through my comments every now and again. And generally, if I feel I need to respond to one, I'll just respond in the comments. And I won't make this a habit, but I recently got 2 replies that I think deserve an entire follow-up video. Both comments were posted under my video earlier this week about what you can do right now to help people continue to access abortions. And the first one I want to talk about, I really, really hoped I wouldn't have to make an entire video about this. And I guess I'm not. It's only part of the video. But I saw a comment in which someone cleverly tried to suggest that women abort their fetuses using things like pennyroyal. And it's mind-boggling that that's even the first thing they list, because I named pennyroyal in the video that they were replying to as an example of a way that a woman seeking an abortion might very well end up dead if she can't get real medicine. Yes, throughout history, people have used a variety of methods and poisons to abort fetuses. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, but the through line is that pretty much all of them gave the pregnant woman a coin flip's chance of surviving. Pennyroyal induces abortion in part by damaging the patient's organs, damages their liver, often leads to multiple organ failure and then death. This commenter actually recommends using the essential oil version of pennyroyal, which is extraordinarily more toxic and has killed people, dogs, anything that comes into contact with it. As I said in a previous video on the subject, essential oils can damage you severely, even just by absorbing through your skin. Do not do this. I know it's cute and fun and cottagecore to pretend that we're all witches who can fight the patriarchy with all natural ways of controlling our bodies, but that is complete, dangerous, pseudoscientific bullshit. Plan C is at least 95% effective with no common dangerous side effects. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on. But yeah, use Plan C. Buy it for people who need it. Tell the world that it works. Don't post things that are going to get people killed. And especially don't post them in my YouTube comments, you fucking assholes. Threaten to kill me and rape my dead body or whatever. Fine. Water off my back. Post something that some innocent woman is going to read and get desperate and try and then die. Fuck you. All right, moving on to the other comment. It's actually kind of a collection of comments that I've seen. A few people asking for clarification and explanation on the actions that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has proposed Democrats in Congress do right now to protect abortion access. I debated going into detail on that in the previous video because it would have been this great big detour. Because I also wanted to tie in something I've seen a lot in the past few months, which is liberals arguing vociferously that there is simply nothing the Democrats could have done in the past 30 years to stop this from happening, and that there's simply nothing they can do now that the Supreme Court has effectively taken over and destroyed our democracy. All we can do is vote blue no matter who, blah, blah, blah. The people making these excuses argue things like, well, yes, the Democrats have several times in the past 30 years had control of the presidency and Congress, but, they might not have had enough voters to overcome the filibuster. And they ignore things like how the Republicans have rarely had even that amount of control, but have accomplished a tremendous amount because Politics is about more than just vote yes or no on this bill. It's about backroom wheeling and dealing. It's about threatening and incentivizing. It's about whipping votes. Like, remember that pre-canceled Kevin Spacey show entirely centered around a guy whose job title was whip? Like, that's what that guy did. He also murdered the occasional journalist, which I am not recommending. I'm just saying that abortion rights have just not been a priority for Democrats. And also, Democrats aren't very good at enacting even overwhelmingly popular legislation, so they haven't gotten it done. Anyway, yes, I would love to talk a little bit more about what AOC has been proposing. So, in that previous video, I specifically pointed to one tweet in which she sums up, briefly a lot of what she's been agitating for lately. So, I'll go through those point by point. First up is restraining judicial review. Judicial review is the idea that the Supreme Court can check the decisions made by the other two branches of government, the executive branch, the president, and the legislative branch, Congress. And in doing so, they will ensure that the actions done by these other two branches represent the will of the people. It's not in the Constitution, this idea of judicial review, but some early politicians thought it was a good idea. So back in the Marbury versus Madison decision of 1803, the Supreme Court struck down an act of Congress as unconstitutional, which kind of established that power for them that's been in play ever since. In fact, that's how we got same-sex marriage. The court used judicial review to strike down as unconstitutional legislation that described marriage as being between a man and a woman only. Judicial review can go in the other direction, though, morally speaking, like when the court ruled that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional because they said Congress couldn't tell states that they had to outlaw slavery. So in theory, if Democrats were interested in pushing out legislation saying women have the basic human right of bodily autonomy and therefore the ability to get an abortion if they want one, then the Supreme Court could turn around and say, well, we think that's unconstitutional, so into the bin with that law. These recent decisions have led to renewed calls to add some restraints, some caveats to judicial review, like insisting that the Supreme Court can only overrule Congress if the decision is unanimous, or there's a very strong majority, 7-2 or something. Whether or not this is a good idea is not something I am equipped to decide. I will leave that up to the experts, and by experts, I mean people who don't just want to protect abortion rights at any cost as soon as possible, but people who want to protect abortion rights and our continued democracy itself, changing things without introducing bigger problems that we have to deal with down the line. I do trust that AOC is one of those latter people, and this does sound like a good idea to me. So next up, she suggests expanding the court. Historically, the Supreme Court has had anywhere from 5 to 10 justices, and Congress has the power to determine exactly how many justices it will have at any one point. That has changed over the years based on just naked political motivations. Like when Andrew Johnson, who Congress rightfully hated, was getting ready to appoint a new justice, Congress just yoinked a few of those seats away, so he couldn't do it. So yeah, a politically motivated Congress that wants to balance out a Supreme Court that is currently full of theocrats could, in theory, vote to add some more seats and let Biden appoint them. However, to do that, they would have to either repeal the filibuster or whip up enough votes to make sure it passes. See my previous comments about whether or not getting this done is a priority, which it isn't, at least for Joe Biden. He has come out and said that he is against the idea of expanding the court. No idea why. Next up is opening clinics on federal lands. As I mentioned in the previous video, In order to do this, Congress might first need to repeal the Hyde Amendment, which took effect in 1980, and it prevents the federal government from directly funding abortions. The biggest problem with that has been a tremendous number of poor and disabled women and others who have uteruses, who get their health insurance through Medicaid. They are unable to use Medicaid for abortions. So if Congress repeals the Hyde Amendment, which they can do through the same means of expanding the court, they can restore full health care rights and access to millions of people, and they would have the ability to open clinics on federal land where state law would no longer apply. That's the idea of federal land. That said, I have seen some experts argue that the Hyde Amendment wouldn't even necessarily apply to this idea, and that the government already can just lease federal property to clinics without repealing the Hyde Amendment. Again, I'm not an expert here. I'll leave it to the experts to fight over. So then we've got expanding education and access to Plan C. This is the thing I mentioned earlier. Plan C is a medical abortion. It is usually administered as 2 pills taken a day or 2 apart, which in 95 to 98% of cases results in the body miscarrying the fetus. You can take the pills at home. There's very little risk. In fact, the risk of complications from taking Plan C is drastically lower than the risk of carrying a pregnancy to term. After you miscarry, if you see a doctor for any reason, they will have no way to know whether you miscarried naturally or not. The pills cost anywhere from $50 to $400, and you can purchase them online. The problem is that not many people know about this, which is why it would be awesome to have a national ad campaign letting people know that they can go to plancpills.org to learn more and to find a trusted source from which to purchase the pills. I've talked about repealing the Hyde Amendment already, so we're going to hop on over to hold floor votes codifying Griswold, Obergefell, Lawrence, Loving, etc. I mentioned this in my first video following the leaked SCOTUS decision, but the basis for overturning Roe v. Wade provides precedent for the court to continue to overrule these other previous decisions that protect our right to privacy, our right to have consensual sex with whoever we want, our right to marry whoever we want, and so on. And that's not just gay marriage, that's also interracial marriage. This is just a suggestion from AOC that Congress go on the offensive. Don't wait for the Supreme Court to get around to overturning all of these, as they have, people like Clarence Thomas, who's in an interracial marriage. But they have gone on record saying that they will likely try to overturn those other things in the future. So hold the votes now. Let's get those things codified into law before it's too late. Finally, AOC recommends a vote on Escobar's bill protecting clinics. Escobar is Veronica Escobar, a congressperson from Texas who in May, just after the leaked Roe v. Wade decision, introduced a bill that would protect healthcare workers across the country by issuing grants for facilities to upgrade their security. So that can mean things like camera networks, but it also can mean cybersecurity. The clinics need to be able to defend themselves from the actual in-person pro-life crazy crowd who has been enacting terroristic acts upon them for decades now, including murdering doctors, and who will likely only get worse with this opinion. But also, cybersecurity, it's very important. It's important for keeping clinics online, and also for protecting the privacy of patients, which is absolutely huge and might be the subject of another video that I get into later. But the short version of this, yes, delete that astrology-based period tracker. Why were you using that anyway? And also, maybe consider using Signal to text your friends, especially if you're texting about abortions, and use DuckDuckGo or another private browser, private search engine if you're going to be searching for important information related to abortions. So that's a bit of a more in-depth discussion on what AOC and a few other Congress people are pushing for, and I think it's great. I highly recommend that you call your Congress critters and ask them what they're doing to knock items off of this list. Thanks so much to everyone for watching and liking and subscribing and all that good stuff. And thank you for the comments that are smart and funny and not full of dangerous pseudoscience that might kill women. I know, it seems like such a low bar, but I guess YouTube still has some work to do on that old moderation algorithm.